Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from group 8 and the members of our group are me as a moderator and also as a first speaker. The second speaker is Nur Hikmayul Fira Hakam. The third speaker is Ikram Nur Amri Akbar and the last speaker is Nur Lindawati. So today we're going to present our discussion. It is about conversation and preference structure. Well, let's move to the first speaker. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Asmaul Husna and I want to explain about conversation analysis, pauses, overlaps, and backhanders. Well, conversation is a process in which people interact on a moment-by-moment, turn-by-turn basis and exchange communicative actions. Conversation analysis is a popular approach to the study of discourse. It is a way of thinking about and analyzing the pragmatic of ordinary conversation, focusing on the interactive, practical construction of everyday interchanges. So there are four conversation analysis. The first is floor. Floor is a scarce commodity or defined as the right to speak. The second is turn. Turn is when a speaker having control of the scarce commodity at any time. In any situation where control is not fixed in advance, anyone can attempt to get control. This is called turn taking. The third is local management. It's conventionally known by members of a social group. The local management system is essentially a set of conventions for getting turns, giving them away. It is about who has the turn. The next is transition relevance place or TRP. Is any possible change of turn point within any social group. There will be features of talk typically associated with a TRP. This type of analytic metaphor provides us with a basic perspective in which speaker having conversation or viewed as taking turns at holding the floor. The metaphor can be applied to those conversations when speakers cooperate and share the floor equally. It can also be used to describe those conversations where speakers seem to be in competition, fighting to keep the floor and preventing others from getting it. The next point is pause. Pause is a silent time. This time usually takes 2.5 until 3 seconds, made by the speaker when having a conversation. There are two types of pauses according to Read in Binti Ida Umayyah 2017. The first is filler pauses like and ah. The second is unfiller pauses like information or just silent. For example, what's your major, Dave? English? Well, I haven't really decided yet. So you want to be a teacher? No, not really. Well, no, if I can help it. What? Where do you go ahead? I mean, it's a the next is attributable silence. If one speaker actually turns over the floor to another and the other doesn't speak, then the silence is attributed to the second speaker and becomes significant. For example, Dave, I'm going to the store. Dave, is something wrong? What? What's wrong? Never mind. The next is overlaps or double slash is simultaneous talk by two or more speakers, irrespective of its status in participants' minds as an interruption. Interruption happens when speaker does not finish the speaking yet, as the listeners take the turn before the speaker has finished speaking. There are two types of overlap. The first is overlap communicate closeness. Overlap talk appears to function as an expression of solidarity or closeness in expressing similar opinions or values. For example, did you see him in the video? Yeah, the part of the beach. Oh my god, he was so sexy. He was just being so cool, and all the waves crashing around him. Yeah, that was really wild. The second is overlap communicate competition. The speaker might appear to be having discussion, but in fact, competing for the floor. For example, when they were in / wait, can I finish? That's my point aside. The point at which overlap occurs is treated as an interruption, and the first speaker actually has to make a comment about procedure with a louder voice when saying, wait, can I finish? Rather than about the conversation topic. Each potential speaker is expected to wait until the current speaker reaches a TRP. The most obvious markers of a TRP are the end of structural unit or press or close, and a pause. The last is backhanders, is response given while someone else is talking to show interest, attention, and or a willingness to keep listening. There are two types of backhanders according to Norik and Fisher in 2009, stated in Umayyah 2017. The first is vocal backhanders like yeah, and aha. The second is non-vocal backhanders like nodding a head, smiling, and doing body language. For example, in face-to-face, the listener holding agreement, leading an inference of disagreement. In telephone, to determine that the listener is still there. For example, if you use long-distance service a lot, then you will be interested in the discount I'm talking about because, yeah, it can only save you money to switch to cheaper service. Well, these types of signals like yeah, and provide feedback to the current speaker that the message is being received. They normally indicate that the listener is following and not objecting to. Absence of backhanders is typically interpreted as a significant. In conversation, silence is significant and will be interpreted as a meaningful.
Okay, well, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I'm Nur Hikmayul Firahakam. So the next material is about conversational style. What is conversational style? Conversation style is the style whether the conversation runs very smoothly without any pauses, with quick reaction, or on the other way around. Next, there are two conversational styles. The first is high involvement style. In this style, the speaking rate is relatively fast, with almost no pausing between turns and with some overlap or even completion of the other's turn. And the second is high considerable style. In this style, the speaker uses slower rate, expects longer pauses between turns, do not overlap, avoid interruption or completion of others' turn. Okay, next is conversational style clashes. Style clashes lead a conversation to be one-sided. The first is the faster speaker may think the slower one doesn't have much to say, is shy, perhaps boring, or even stupid. And the second is the slower speaker might view the faster one as noisy, pushy, domineering, selfish, and tiresome. Features of conversational style are often interpreted as personal traits. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will explain about the adjacency pairs material. An adjacency pair is a unit of conversation that contains an exchange of one turn each by two speakers. The turns are functionally related to each other in such a fashion that the first turn requires a certain type of range of types and of second turn. In linguistics, an adjacency pair is an example of conversation turn taking. An adjacency pair is composed of two U-turns by two speakers, one after the others. The speaking of the first U-turns, we can say it the first pair part or the first U-turns provokes a responding U-turns. We can say the second pair part or the second turn. Adjacency pair are a component of pragmatics, variation in the study of linguistics, and are considered primarily to be evident in interactional function of pragmatics. Adjacency pairs exist in every language and vary in context and content among each based on the cultural values held by speakers of the respective language. Let's take a look the example of in the next slide. As you can see, there are 6 examples of adjacency pairs. The first is a question has the preferred response of an answer pair. A question's preferred response an answer, and the second a greetings response of a greeting pair, an offer preferred response of an acceptance, and a proposal preferred response an agreement, and a complaint preferred response of an apology. In conversation analysis, an adjacency pair is a two-part exchange in which the second nutrient is functionally dependent on the first, as exhibited in conventional greetings, invitations, and requests. It is also known as the concept of nextness. Each pair is spoken by a different person. Uh, Next, adjacency pairs typically have three characteristics. The first one is they consist of two U-turns or more, and the second, the U-turns are adjacent. That is, the first immediately follow the second speakers, and the last is different speakers produce each U-turns. Let's take a look an example. Uh, the first speaker said, "What time does it is? What time does it start?" And the second speaker said 8:35. It showed that their conversation is relevant or uh, contained, atau we can say the Indonesian is nyambung. And the maxim of relations, the maxim of relations. The speaker are assumed to be saying something relevant to what has been said before. We can see there are two examples. The first example is the baby cried and the mommy picked it up. We assume that the mommy was his mother and she picked him up. She picked his baby because he was crying. It is relevant because the mommy surely had the baby. And the second example, there is somebody at the door, and the second speaker said, "I'm at the bed," and surely the bed has the door, and it is relevant from the first speaker. That's from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Nurlin Dawati, and thanks for the change. I will explain the next material is about preparent structure. What is preparent structure? Basically, first part that contains a request or an offer is typically made in the expectation that the second part will be an acceptance. Acceptance is structurally more likely than a refusal. This structural likelihood is called preference. And the term preference is used to indicate a social determined structure pattern and does not refer to any individual's mental or emotional desires. Okay, next, in a preference structure there are two classes, namely first part and second part. First part, it contains about question or statement, and this statement or this question it can be in the form of invitation or an offer or assessment or proposal or so on. And second part is how to respond. Okay, next. Okay, in the second part divides into two. The first is prepare social act and this prepare social act. Prepare is the structurally expected next act, and this prepare is structurally unexpected next act, or prepare is acceptance response, and this prepare is refusal response. Okay, we move to the next slide. It's an example of preference structure. On the screen you can see the example of prepare, and on the table there are two, the first part and the second part. In the first part, for example, can you help me? And second, sure. One sun copy, yes please. I send a really great, yes it is. Maybe we could go for a walk, that's be great. It is the example of prepare response, and on the table in the first part is the sentence from A is an example of sentence request, and part B is the example of offer, and and C is the example of assessment, and D is example of proposal. We move to the next slide. Is example of this prepare. You can see the dialogue. Come over for some copy later. Wali, I love to, but you see, I am supposed to get finished. You know, this is an example of this prepare response. It's a refusal response because Wali refused invitation of Becky. The Wali expression of refusal can be accomplished without saying no. Notes: prepared shown acceptance like yes, agree, or accept, and disprepared shown refusal the signal no, or pause, or oh, and so on. Okay, we move to the next slide. Silent as a response. We may say that in any identifier, silent in the second part is always an indication of this prepared response. Silent as a response often leads the speaker to repass the first part in order to get a second part that is not silence from the other speaker. Okay, to make it clear, you can see the example. Sandy, but I'm sure that I will have good food there, and Sandy, I guess that the food isn't great. And Jackie, people mostly go for the music. From the example where Jack silence and responds to Sandy comment, from Sandy to restate her assessment, Jack then agree or prepare with Sandy assessment. Notice that Jack's silence occurs where he would have had to produce a disagreement regarding Sandy assessment. Non-response communicates that the speaker is not in a position to provide the prepared response. However, silent as a response is an extreme case, almost risking the information of non-participation in the conversational structure. In expressing this prepared second part, speaker use hesitation, pauses, and preface. For example, like Vicky come over for some coffee later, and Wally, I love to, but you see, I'm supposed to get this finished, it. From Wally expression, is a example of preface, and is a hesitation, and pauses is a okay. I think enough for me, and thank you.
Well, that's all from our group, and thanks for your attention. And if you have questions, feel free to ask.